Good morning, King's Chapel. I'm really happy to be with you in this virtual way this morning. I realized as I was preparing to record this sermon that it has been 6 years, almost to the Sunday, since I last preached in a congregation where I was a member. Since that time, I've been preaching in various places, but always welcomed as a guest, a visitor, and that's an entirely different thing. Even though I've only been a member of King's Chapel for the last 6 months, it is deeply meaningful for me to be a part of this congregation. And in these last 3 months especially, it's been a great balm to me. I look forward to that sense of belonging growing as I get to know more of you. I want to thank Joy for giving me this privilege of offering a sermon this morning, and a special word of thanks to Joy and to David for their ministry. After a long time of being the minister, I am so grateful that you two are my ministers. I want to offer just a little bit of an introduction. I was ordained as a Unitarian Universalist minister 33 years ago next week. I found Unitarian Universalism in the Deep South after growing up in the Episcopal Church. My plans to go to law school were interrupted when I found my faith in Unitarian Universalism and felt the call to ministry. Advocacy and justice have always been an important aspect of my own life of faith, and though I loved being a parish minister, it is an incredible privilege and a joy to be doing ministry now with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, or UUSC. I appreciate Joy's encouragement to share a little more about UUSC and our ministry this morning. Our gospel reading today very simply assures that as we welcome the one who comes in righteousness, even the prophet, even the littlest one, as we welcome the one who comes in righteousness and offer the smallest kindness, we will have our reward. As a Universalist, considering reward is not often at the front of my thinking. But I like how this passage hints at the ancient device of reminding the faithful that we might not know who is bearing the message of God, or even who is God arriving in disguise. And what greater reward could there be than the presence of God with us? I want to share the story of UUSC's founders this morning, but not necessarily as the righteous ones who were welcomed, though you might look at it that way. In fact, Martha and Wait Still Sharp are two of only a few from the United States to be honored by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations, an honor bestowed on non-Jews for their work during the Holocaust. But I prefer to think of them as the ones who welcomed, and in so doing, who encountered the Most Holy. In the late 1930s, Unitarians in Prague were in touch with the American Unitarian Association asking for help. Wait Still Sharp was the minister of the Wellesley Hills Unitarian Church, and he and his wife, Martha, arranged care for their 2 young children, and they answered the call. They traveled to Prague just a few months after the Munich Agreement was signed, and just a few months before Hitler's promise to leave Prague alone was broken by his invading army. The Sharps were in Prague under a year before they were forced to flee for their lives. In those months, they distributed all of the aid coming from the United States to support people under siege in Czechoslovakia. They created false papers for refugees to aid in their escape, and they accompanied some to safer border areas. At one point, they had to destroy files to protect the identity of refugees they had assisted as troops ransacked their office. Wade still left the country first, planning to return, but he was not allowed back. Then late in the summer, after their February arrival, Martha managed to escape the pursuit of the Gestapo. After a short time back in the United States, they returned to set up offices for aiding refugees in Lisbon and Marseille. And Martha coordinated one of the earliest transports of children escaping the Nazis. For 80 years, our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee has been working in partnership with those most directly impacted by injustice to imagine a different world, a beloved community where every person's rights are honored and protected. For instance, we joined with migrant workers in Texas in the 1940s as they fought against exploitation. We launched desegregation projects in Georgia and Florida in 1960. In 1978, UUSC sponsored the first congressional fact-finding mission to El Salvador as violence there was escalating. In the 1980s, we sent emergency funds to ease the Ethiopian famine long before the story reached the mainstream media. We sent emergency medical equipment to Rwanda in the 1990s and then launched the Drumbeat for Darfur campaign in the 2000s to help end the genocide in Sudan. In 2010, we went to Haiti to assist with immediate relief after the earthquake and remained to partner for long-term recovery. Today, UUSC works with organizations in Central America, Mexico, and the United States on the forefront of migrant justice as we seek security for people who wish to remain in their home countries, safety for those traveling along the migrant trail, and justice for those who arrive in the United States seeking safety and asylum. We partner with First and Indigenous communities in the South Pacific, Louisiana, and Alaska, who are on the front lines of the climate crisis as their homes and way of life are threatened by rising sea levels and rising temperatures. We are working with Rohingya leaders as they seek justice and healing for their communities following genocide and forced displacement from their homeland by the Burmese government. Through our Love Resists collaboration with the UUA, we work with communities impacted by criminalization to dismantle detention systems and to uplift the rights of all. And recently, we are joining with the minority Haitian community in the Bahamas after the devastation of Hurricane Dorian as they seek to rebuild their lives with no access to government assistance. One of the most vital values we bring to this work for justice is an affirmation of the inherent power and dignity of every person. Power and dignity. And so our work is not about bringing our wisdom, our righteousness to other people, but it's about seeing and welcoming theirs and building a world with them where the systemic barriers to people exercising their power and dignity are dismantled. It's a very particular kind of welcoming each other. It's universalist in spirit. And while we could interpret the act of welcoming as a passive response to the world around us, I don't think that's what this morning's scripture is suggesting at all. We are always diminished, each of us and all of us, when we are unable to see and live in the truth of our kinship, our connection, our shared humanity, that each person is beloved of God, and we are called to welcome each other and build a world where each of us and all of us have what we need to live with dignity. This, for me, this is the foundation of human rights. The work, of course, is incredibly hard. And sometimes it's hard to imagine that we can build another way, Systems of supremacy create and perpetuate injustice by denying that we are all children of God with power and dignity. Systems like racism, xenophobia, colonialism, patriarchy. And these systems become such an interwoven part of our lives, sometimes it's really hard for us to see them. And also, our human condition as individuals, we too often tolerate those systems and look away from the harm that they create. While the call to welcome the righteous and the prophets and the littlest ones and offer a drink of water may seem somewhat undramatic or not quite enough, I believe it represents a spiritual practice of seeing and recognizing that each of us and all of us are beloved of God. And while that sounds simple and is probably something all of us assume about our lives and how we want to be living our lives, it's an incredibly demanding practice. And we fall short, of course. So I give thanks again for a religious community that calls me back again and again to the reward of God's presence and love. I give thanks that I can borrow courage from you, and that there is wisdom and faithfulness and courage and imagination beyond my own. The story of the founding of our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee may seem distant, unlike anything we could or would do in our lives, but it really isn't. The most important thing Martha and Waisel Sharp did was face what was happening. They did not turn away, they acted. The calling for us that arises from their legacy isn't that we should all leave home, but that we must dare to see and we must dare to act. I am glad to see James Baldwin often quoted these days, his powerful reminder, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I also think of the words of Buddhist teacher Joanna Macy, who encourages us. The main thing is that you're showing up, that you're here, and that you are finding ever more capacity to love this world, because it will not be healed without that. That is what is going to unleash our intelligence and our ingenuity and our solidarity for healing the world. The intelligence and ingenuity and solidarity that is needed for healing our world will take each of us and all of us. May we welcome each other again and again and know God's sure reward.